Hello, everybody. Thank you for the presentation, Francisco. That was a very interesting project we worked on, and let's see what happens. But as we always see, projects don't live as islands. They depend on so many forces around them. So clearly, political forces are the one that is making this project not to be built. But right now, I'm going to show you a very different project. Just to give you some background, my studio is called Fierro. I'm based in New York City, but I'm originally from Mexico City. That's why Francisco and I know each other from a long time ago. And this project I will show you. Just to tell you a bit, my studio is a human architecture and design studio, and it's basically focused in projects, products, and research. We do a lot of research as well. So this is the context. I will present Striver Farm Longhouse, which is actually a personal project. My family and I, we bought this piece of land during the pandemic, 2020, although we were looking for some land before. And this piece of land is in upstate New York. So New York State is quite big. Most people know New York City, but there's this vast territory all the way on the north that it's very different in all areas. So this particular location is called Dutchess County, and it's, as you can see, it's this beautiful farm landscape. That one of the things that I would like you to notice is that the change of seasons make already a very interesting palette. It's a place that is actually extremely hot and humid in the summer, but extremely humid and cold in the winter, with snow loads and winds that are quite dramatic. So every single decision has to be resistant to this condition. So it's always two very dramatic conditions that inform your design. So as you can see in these photos, the landscape starts changing, and one of the most beautiful things is that it not only changes the landscape, but your architecture would also adapt and look differently and have a different dialogue with nature depending on the season. And I'm sure you're familiar with that because in Europe you have something very similar. So I think they stopped, but can you go to the next slide, please? So that's next one also. Thank you. And then in the winter, right? So same location, but very different conditions. So can you go back one? Thanks. No, that's all the way at the end. We'll get there, we'll get there. Thank you. The map, yeah, the site plan, the green map, yeah, perfect. Thank you. So as I was saying, it's a triangle, and it's an interesting piece of land because it's very binary. Half of it is a forest, half of it is a field, an open field. So we engage with a local farmer to take care of the field. And in our discussions, he actually pointed out that he was going to till the land to oxygenate. It's prime agricultural land, so it's very good soil for agriculture. And in those conversations, he mentioned that we should pick up arrowheads. And we were like very intrigued by this idea, like, what do you mean arrowheads? And then I started going back to research, because research always points us in the right direction. And I discovered that there's a monument. Is this a pointer? Is there a pointer? The red? It doesn't work, no? Bueno, over here, I'll show you. Over here, there's a monument, a historical monument, that is the Mohican Moravian monument. And when I started doing the research of this story, it's about an ideal community of Indians and Dutch people, Native Americans and Dutch people living together in communion. They even have like some art paintings that are physically in a museum in Germany, because it was a very rare situation. They were marrying between each other, they were working together. It was really like an ideal community. And then doing more research, also all this land was located in the territories of the 5 main tribes of Native Americans. And the Indians that were living here, they were the Mohicans, the Iroquois, and the Sequoias. So just to show you, can you do the next slide, please? Thank you. So to my surprise, when I started looking at the villages where they were living, these images started coming up, which to me were extremely modern in shape and more closer than what I thought. Closer to our time, to our construction methods. These are the longhouses. They're called longhouses. They're made out of wood. But this is the classical village of the Mohicans or the Iroquois. And that fence around it, it's called the Palisades. One of the main highways that go up there, it's also called the Palisades. So it's interesting also to see how all these layers of history start, accumulating through the centuries, and we carry on things, and things come to existence from the past, where we kind of lost the link. So I was very intrigued by this story, and then I was actually quite excited to do a modern longhouse of our times with a commercial construction type of method that could also create this vaulted ceiling. I'll show you a bit more. But what is quite interesting is that also it deals with the snow, because I wanted to avoid the typology of the gable roof, which is multiplicated in America. One thing that happens, and we tried really hard in the studio, is that America has decided and designed a whole system that is based on quicker, faster, and cheaper. And they have a series of products that everybody has access to, but that's why you go to suburbia, American suburbia, and everything looks exactly the same. There's a repetition, that there's no style, there's no difference, there's no identity. Everything is the same, with materials that are actually quite thought for the short term. So I was excited with the challenge of using those materials, but in a way that they could be more resilient and with bigger longevity. So also, the other important information is that the underground, like the geological layer of this project, is all that piece of land is sitting on a bedrock of limestone. So it's a very porous stone. So also the responsibility of keeping clean this land, because everything that you would put in, the water, any pesticides that you would put in, would actually go back to the water mantles. And we felt the responsibility of also understanding the underground to keep this precious land as clean as it has been for, the last 600 years. So what we did is we created this almost monastic architecture, which in a way, I mentioned I'm originally from Mexico City, but I've been living in Paris, in Brazil, in New York. I left Mexico City about almost 20 years ago. So I started accumulating a lot of imaginaries that go beyond architecture or construction. And all these imaginaries started coming when I was designing this house, because in a way, this is very similar to the convents where I grew up. And I was always fascinated that you would go into these convents with very thick walls that were super fresh in the summer. They were warm in the winter. They create like this spatial experience, unlike any other buildings I've been. Of course, here in Europe, you have beautiful examples of that. But in our case, it was like the colonialism and the structures that came out of that colonialism. So in a way, to me, was kind of a very familiar space. So we started this project with the idea of a lifetime project, and we also wanted to keep, again, enclosed in a way, but also access to this beautiful landscape that we get to experience. So it was thought as a passive house. It's a longhouse. It still respects the dimensions of the longhouse, which is like 10 feet by 30 feet, meters, 10 meters by 30 meters. And it's oriented east-west, so it gets all the exposure from the sun. And it has these overhangs in the windows, so in summer you can get protected from the sun, but in winter all the sun comes in and activating the thermal mass, which is the brick and the concrete working together. So an example how it looks at night. And also, like, one thing that I forgot to mention, the land, I mentioned it was half a forest and half a field. So the house sits right at the intersection of both to be protected from the elements, but still get all the sunlight from the south. And the way we build this, because at the end, we have to do something with available labor, existing materials, as I was mentioning. So we went back to the cavity wall. The cavity wall is a construction system that they've been using for schools. It was originally used for domestic, for houses, but it became prohibited. Labor changed, other products came into the market, so there were fewer brick masons. So it was extremely used for schools. So all the schools, if you go to New York City, you've seen in the films in New York City, all these schools that are very iconic, where people are playing basketballs. It's basically this type of construction. So that was working in our favor. And then for the bolt, we had to think about something that would also work with available standardized elements. So we came with this idea to use precast bridge arches, which you can buy for a very accessible price. And we decided to actually put 17 of them to create this vault. They sell the connections. And it was quite accessible compared to actually trying to, or dare to pour a concrete vault the way they do it in Mexico, right? With the labor. It was just like impossible. But this made it possible. And we would actually cover it with the brick on top. So that was all working really well. It's basically, a concrete foundation and concrete structure, all covered by brick. And that's the concept of the cavity wall. So that's and then these are some of the images. As you can see, the land starts sloping from north to south. So all this part is the forest that I was showing you before. And then this is where, we removed the trees here so you could actually see the image. But then the south is in that direction. Let me show you a couple more images. This is the site plan. So another thing that was important for us was it's all conservation land, so you don't see many houses around, and we like that privacy. So the bar of the house would be exposed to the south, but all the public patios and activities, more family activities, would happen inside the forest. That's why we have all these series of patios, like a gravel patio, a green patio, a water patio, all inside the forest, so it's never seen, so it gets you some privacy. Also because we had all this material, I mentioned the limestone, and when we were digging, we used a technique that was cut and fill, so we're using everything that we find on site, and we found huge boulders of stone. So I think I already collected 100 of these boulders, and we can crack them into smaller pebbles for the roads, for the patios. So we're trying to use all that material to stay within and avoid transportation and all that stuff. So that's let me show you. Yeah, so these are the plans. Just to show you quickly. And then I'll just show you some other images. And this is why images also show you that the change of the house through the seasons because for us it's one of the most beautiful things, like this possibility of having like 4 projects in one. It's always very exciting, as I'm sure it is for you. And this is like the portico, the entrance, that was the main access of the house. An outdoor seating area that happens on the northern side of it. You know, one of these patios. Some of the interior images. Looking south, those are the big windows with the overhangs. The master bedroom looking east. And these are all like the real pictures of the site. So it's just like you really want to make honor. And this is like another thing, like changing the seasons, how it looks. And another thing that was quite nice to us is that this pool, the code in New York State always asks you to have a pool with a fence around, like a 1.20 fence, which is really, it kills the beauty of it. And we thought, well, that's a terrible law, but how can we bypass it? And we came up to the conclusion that given this topography, we could like embed the house in the topography, and the circulation was lower. So the pool is always elevated, so you're never really at the level of the pool. So already the pool is elevated. And then another piece of vegetation, so the only way you could actually access the pool would be from the front. And there you would have to put some kind of defense. But like, always trying to, ways to deal with the code, as we all do, right? Trying to find ways around it and beautify things, still code compliance, and that's what we try to do. Let me see if it keeps advancing. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And one last thing that I do want to say is that the house is still going on, but not like this. Through COVID, labor change, inflation, we decided to do something very similar that eventually you'll see, but the convent will have to wait, the monastery. Thank you so much.